Toyota put me through a lot. It wasn't fun, but for you guys, here's the story. Alright, so here's my full disclaimer. I'm not going to say every single one of these dates that I have is absolutely exact. Some of them I kind of forgot the day. I went back through records of emails and calls and a bunch of other things to try to get all these dates for you guys so I could explain this to the best of my ability. I also have myself a nice little cheat sheet. So not everything that I have out here is the only things that went on in this process. November 22nd, that's just about when everything started. For a little bit of time before that, I noticed the car had been having some problems and I was ready to bring it in. I take it to a local garage usually, but the car was acting really funny. It gave me the oil light, which not everybody knows is actually an oil pressure light. It's not supposed to say how much is in it, but how much pressure it is. Low oil pressure can often mean there isn't as much oil as there should be, but it is not a oil amount light, it's a pressure light. Now I noticed this light came on when I was going around turns for just like a second. This is the kind of thing where I wouldn't expect anyone who wasn't weird about their car like me, or a lot of people that really like their cars or in the car community, to notice. So I was driving, got back here to my house, and I was coming up the street and the car started to stall. I was taking the turn onto my street in second gear like I usually would. But as I was doing that, the car started to stall in second gear going around that turn, which was really odd for me. I eventually got to my house up where I park on the street. Car stalled and didn't turn back on. At that point, I could obviously tell something very bad was going on. So I wasn't just going to take it to the small local shop that I usually do. I was like, alright, I'm just going to take it to Toyota themselves. They're going to charge so much more than they should, but I really need to know exactly what's going on from people like this that know the cars and are professionals on them. So that day, November 22nd, I took it in, and this is what they gave me back. All that probably happened, my guess would actually be the 21st, because it was the next day they got back to me, but this is what I got the next day. I got this list of what they said what was wrong with the car. And when I took it to them, they said they were going to charge me $100 just for their looking at it and maybe determining what it is, because they wouldn't say only $100 if they have to take apart the engine. So they said $100 pretty much for you to just drive in the door and we can start doing something. So it wasn't long later that they obviously discovered they have to go into the engine, and they told me on the 22nd there that it would cost me $1,600 just for them to take the engine apart, what they called halfway of labor. So that's $1,600 to take it apart, and then obviously to put it back together would double that, and whatever else work they had to do. So at this point, I'm thinking, not gonna happen. I've just lost this car. The car isn't worth putting $3,000, $5,000 into when the car is only worth maybe around $6,000. So with this, they also, the next day, I don't really have a lot of I don't have any paperwork for this actually. So I just kind of have some other assorted Toyota things in the place. But they brought up the ZE7. And what the ZE7 is it was an oil consumption issue that happened in many of the Toyotas of this generation. From the Camry, the RAV4, the Scion TC, the Scion XB, I believe, was also on the list. The cars that have had this issue. Now this program had actually expired, but they said because it is something that they've went over before, and it hadn't been very long that I'd had the car myself, that they could still use an angle on this. At this point, I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe it kind of sounds like it could be a good idea, but I really do not want to put money into this car because it's not the kind of car that you want to be putting $5,000 into when it's not worth a lot more than that. So if you've watched my other video on this from a while back during this process, what they did with the Z7 at that point is they said, look, what you can do is you can pay how much ever this costs. They said they guessed around $3,500 at that point. Fix everything, and then what I could do is I could then take the car back, I could drive it for 1,200 miles, and if I could prove that the car consumed oil at an excessive rate, so if it burned a quart of oil, then we could file for reimbursement for that money. So if that worked out, I wouldn't really have to pay anything in this process. Now they told me about that process, and obviously I was very iffy on it. They're saying maybe I could get paid back if I spend a big amount of money. I thought about this for a long time, and I had a lot of communication with many people at my Linkster Toyota, and after a lot of consideration, I actually decided to go for it. It ended up being a good bit more than $3,500, about $4,300 in all is what it cost. December 13th, they called and said, we're done, we're just going to do a road test real quick, and we'll try to get it back to you tomorrow, which they did. So on December 14th, I got this bill, which that's a little inaccurate. I'm pretty sure it was $4,500. At that point, my mother was kind enough to put down the money, knowing that maybe she'd get it all back, and maybe I'd have to pay her back for it over a long time. So Toyota really put me in a really crappy situation there. It was a gamble, and the guy there even said it was a gamble. He took it back and said risk, because he just didn't like that word as a business person, but it was a gamble. So during this process, the next step was to actually perform the test, was to drive the 1,200 miles. Now, they put stickers everywhere, so I couldn't actually tamper with it or even check where the oil was myself. So I took it in after just about 400 miles of driving it, just so they could check the level, because I didn't want to drive if there wasn't enough oil in the car to be good for it. After that, just 400 miles, it had already failed. I got exactly what I asked for in that process, so they told me it failed, and they had scheduled me to come in and to start the repair on the 27th. They finished that repair on December 30th, and that was completely free. That's what all of this is. Total invoice came to $0. So that was, they fixed the components of the engine which had to do with the oil consumption issue, whereas before they fixed what made the engine not run at all. So that was the dire issues, and this was just some things like headers that were leading to these cars consuming oil excessively. So January 4th, I send in all of this information, filing for reimbursement just like they told me to do, hoping to get the full about $4,500 back. I sent them copies of the failed Z7, and I sent them copies of all the work done. Now, I called a few times, and there really was not a lot I got back from them. I was waiting on something, like, come on, let me know what's going on. They said it would be about 30 days, I believe, that they would get back. February 14th, I called them, hey, what's going on? I really want my money. And they told me that I didn't have all the information because they never asked me for all the information. So they actually still needed some things. They needed proof of ownership, title, and proof that I paid, a receipt. I faxed that to them later that day. I gave them a call just a couple days ago here, March 6th, and that call was, hey, come on, I gave you everything. You said 30 days. It's been a lot more than that. I'm tired of this. Like, what's going on? Where's the check? And they said, oh, you know, we actually just mailed it out not too long ago, so you should get it soon. So I looked in the mailbox, and that day, there it was, the check, $4,500 from Toyota, from November 22nd all the way to the day I got the check, March 6th, and all this crap in between finally worked out. A lot of the people at the Lancaster Toyota were very helpful, but this process was very frustrating. It took way too long, and the situation they put me in was, frankly, I think was unprofessional. Saying, hey, you can fix it yourself, and then maybe if you can prove it's our fault, then we'll pay for it. But, you know, it could be our fault, but we don't want to do anything about it until you give us $4,500 to fix it yourself. So we don't want any responsibility. We'll just help you if you can prove that, you know, it was completely our fault. Yeah. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video. I want to put out the experience I went through with Toyota and their whole oil consumption thing. The ZE7 test passed the official date. If you guys have anything to say, any questions about the process, you agree, you've been through it yourself, leave a comment. Let me know if this is something that's been a problem for you. Please hit that like button. I put a good amount of work into getting this set up so I could let you guys know what this process is like. Also, going through the process, obviously from November 22nd to March 6th, has been a huge pain. As always, hit that subscribe button, it helps me out a bunch, and catch you on the flip. Alright, Toyota, this is how I feel about you. That's how I feel. Right there.